Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We are live from Los Angeles, and this is your host, Young Brando. I'm very excited today. I actually arrived home, came back home pretty late. Um, wasn't really in the mood to do anything at all, much less a live stream. But then, I found one of my old jerseys. I found a surprise in my mailbox from YouTube, actually, which is pretty neat. It's not just the partner's check, which is quite meager, as you guys know, but that's another topic. Um, I will try to share that surprise. Who knows? Maybe if you actually, yeah, I should have. Sorry, let me cancel this goal. And actually, if I get five super chats of $5 or higher in the next hour, I will share the YouTube surprise, the surprise that YouTube sent me to celebrate my partnership, to give me a little bit of an encouragement, since I certainly need it. Lacking a lot of times the kind of consistency I think that I require. I hope it helps. And as long as you guys are there, I should keep coming back at any rate. I'm also going to share some news that, again, that is at the crossroads of two passions that I have. Of course, watches, that's very obvious. And um, sorry, GB Vol, I would never take fashion or style advice from anyone, because what really matters is for you to develop your own sense of style and find ways to feel comfortable in your skin. If you feel that tying a sweater over your shoulder is not for you, by all means, don't do it. Don't ever do it. Um, as someone who has grown up with prep style, prep being um, prep being a synonym both for preposterous and prep school. I think I'm entitled to that style. It's like birthright to me, if you know what you mean, if you know what I mean. Um, and I did actually, by the way, I did have an underbite was when I was a kid, and it kind of healed itself magically without any dental intervention, which should give you a few more ideas. I do want to say that um, I don't really like you, just so you know there, but you can keep existing in the chat because I feel like it provides some sort of release for you. So please stay as long as you like. And as long as you just keep ribbing at me rather than one of my guests, you should be just fine. Um, I was saying I'm actually going to talk about something that is at the crossroads of two of my passions. Speaking of being aggro, I love boxing, I love watches, and with the help of my friend, the watch designer Jason Sarkoyan, I actually was able to discover this new watch that was presented to the four-weight world champion Terence Crawford, who is going to face Canelo in, what is it, in about 3 weeks now. I don't even know who you are. How can I dox you? I love the kind of language that these like lifetime online people have, calling someone pedophile, uh, telling that you doxed me. What else is there? That you're mean. this and that. I love it. I love it. Bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on. I miss this terminally online culture. That's what will keep me coming back, actually. It's going to be amazing. So I'm going to present you a watch that was just put on the wrist of four-weight world champion Terence Crawford, who is going to face Canelo to achieve possibly his fifth weight world championship, because the fight is taking place at Canelo's weight, I meant to say, at 168. That's a very exciting fight. That's a fight that's very difficult to predict. I don't mean to overhype it, but I've heard it called our generations of Leonard versus Hagler, which promises a lot. I hope it doesn't underdeliver. I genuinely hope it does not underdeliver, but I know it is going to be a good fight, even if it can't necessarily aspire to that once in a lifetime, once in a generation level of event. As always, we are going to start with talking about a few interesting watches that I shared with my Instagram audience over the last few days. And we are going to build from there. Here's a very interesting one. This is an American painter, Chase Hall, who was one of the bazaar icons for 2025. The magazine Harper's Bazaar US usually chooses a handful of people, usually young people, up-and-coming people, to highlight their achievements. And this year, the painter Chase Hall was one of them. And he's actually a very interesting artist. I'm not going to go very deep into it, but he does explore questions of race, culture, and identity. And in fact, for him, the medium itself is part of his message, right? Because he actually uses brewed coffee and the variety of brown pigments that it creates in his painting, and he does that on a raw cotton canvas. So it's very thought-provoking stuff, and it's just great art to begin with, beyond that particular detail. So I would highly recommend that you perhaps explore if that is something that interests you. For me, what interested me in this particular shot was, of course, the watch on his wrist, which is a Bulgari piece. And it is actually the Octo Roma. The Octo Finissimo, in a way, became a little more common, although it is by no means a popular watch. I don't necessarily share that as a value judgment. I personally like it a lot, even though I find it a tad too big for my wrist, but that's my own shortcoming more than anything else. But the Octo Roma, and the reason I think the Octo Finissimo has that sort of primacy within the line is, of course, in the last decade or so, Bulgari really distinguished itself as a watchmaker by breaking record after record for having ultra thin, the thinnest versions of these kinds of watches, right? From the perpetual calendar to the tourbillon to the thinnest watch altogether, so on and so forth. So predictably, the Octo Finissimo took some sense of primacy, but I think in the last few years, they started putting a little more attention to the Octo Roma as perhaps a more accessible version, and that is in many different meanings of the word. It is actually cheaper, and Octoroma is, usually cheaper than its Octofinissimo counterpart. It is also, I think, as a design, a little less edgy, a little more rounded and less angular. So it might be more approachable in that sense to many other enthusiasts. And this particular piece actually sports the new matte green dial, which has a stamped Clou de Paris pattern on it. Nice. Tickle my talk says miracles happen. Wife picked up her 36 OP Tiffany from AD. It's amazing. That's really amazing. I mean, it's, obviously it got a lot of flack at the time, specifically because there was that intense hype generated by the Patek Philippe X Tiffany and Company Nautiluses, which not intentionally and not exactly somewhat coincided with the revival of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual and with those new lacquered dials, the so-called Neo Stella dials, so to speak. But I think in hindsight, now that the prices have on the secondary market also have calmed down just a little bit, I think people will probably stop hating those dial variations as much. And I'm going to present actually just another dial option for that Oyster Perpetual 36 that's on someone else's wrist in a bit. So Chase Hall is wearing the Bulgari Octoroma Sole Tempo, which means time only, but it is a time and date watch after all. From a distance, by the way, as much as I hate date windows at 3 o'clock, it actually looks quite neat, right? Kind of blends into that hour marker at 3 o'clock, so not so bad. And this particular piece, in addition to the integrated bracelet, the matching bracelet on which it's presented, also has a rubber strap, which, by the way, mimes the pattern that is on the dial, that hobnail pattern that decorates the dial as well. And it's an interchangeable system, so it's pretty easy to remove and change around. So the second one is actually kind of a throwback, and this is part of a series in a way, because I posted two Air Kings in recent time. As you guys know, I shared this 2022 photo where Roger Federer was crying for having to wear an Air King. Joking aside, of course, this was when he officially announced his retirement at the Lever Cup, when he got eliminated from the doubles tournament that he was participating in with his partner, Rafael Nadal. So I wanted to continue that series with a little bit of a throwback as well, where Ryan Gosling was promoting the sequel to the cult movie Blade Runner 2049. I believe, by the way, they're coming up with yet another Blade Runner movie That's going to be 2099, if I'm not mistaken. But this was back in 2017, where Ryan Gosling was wearing a vintage example of the Rolex Air King with a 369 dagger dial. This is a reference 5500, so 34 millimeters. And even though the Air King branding was not introduced with this particular reference, in fact, it was introduced with hand-wound series. In many ways, the reference 5500 is the definitive reference point for the vintage Air King, even for Air King writ large, in the same way that perhaps 1016 is to the Rolex Explorer, right? 1016 is also not the first reference for the Rolex Explorer. However, it's perhaps the first image of a Rolex Explorer that comes to one's mind. And I wanted to accompany it also by a section from a contemporary advertisement where they actually presented a very similar looking piece to the one that Ryan Gosling was wearing back in 2017. Of course, now, since he endorses another brand, he doesn't really get to wear his Rolexes as much, at least not in public. But there we go. It also has, his particular example also has that sort of evenly distributed, fine eggshell hued patina on the dial, which, again, interestingly, looks very much like this. By the way, this kind of patina reminds me of the beige that they are using these days with the new Oyster Perpetual series, with the new colors they integrated into the Oyster Perpetual line. And I mean, I have to say, I do like the vintage Air Kings considerably more than what currently exists. Although I do understand that there is a need to have these perfectly distinguished product families within the larger catalog, right? You know, if we had an Air King that looked something like this, it would really, in 36 millimeters, let's say, it would really look more or less like another Oyster Perpetual with a different dial option. So for them to have revived it a certain way in actually 2016 with that Bloodhound SSC inspired dial makes sense in retrospect. Whether it aligns with my personal taste or not, you know, that's another matter altogether. This is Ryan Gosling and his vintage Air King. Off you go. I'm sorry, I thought you would at least be honorable enough to present, I don't know, factual information minimally, but that's not going to happen. It's inevitable with a classless individual like you, so you have to be shown the door. I'm sorry, I'm sure you will find yourself a nice home with all the rest of garbage channels that supposedly make watch content on YouTube, but you will never be seen here again. The third watch that I wanted to share with you is something that caught me off guard. This is Daniel Gandelman. Speaking of which, the ghost of the Yiddish Gambino. Good to see your stream, YB. I'm Israel Chai. Thank you. Good to see you here as well. Daniel Gandelman, who is the founder and CEO of the exclusive dating app Raya, has been at work on a new travel recommendation app simply called Places. So he had this whole feature on, what was it? It was the WSG mag, the Wall Street Journal magazine. And he was actually wearing this very interesting Rolex Oyster Perpetual Date, sometimes simply called Rolex Oyster Date. These are, again, 34 millimeter watches from that glorious 4-digit era. And this particular piece, I believe, is probably a late 70s example. At least that's what I discerned from the look of the bracelet, which looks like a folded link piece, folded link bracelet. And it has this very, I don't know, in a way, very approachable, monochromatic, simple, no-nonsense look. Of course, it's in all in stainless steel. Of course, it is here mounted on an oyster bracelet. And it does have a very distinctive engine-turned bezel, which is also in matching stainless steel. And you probably know, if you know enough about the history of Rolex, that engine-turned bezels of a different sort have, with different decorations, so to speak, have been found in a number of in various references of Rolex, but perhaps the one that almost immediately comes to mind is the one that used to adorn, as an alternative to the white gold fluted bezels, variations of the Rolex Datejust. But this is a different kind of decoration. It's more similar to what we see as an inner bezel in the Gérard Gentla designed Universal Genève Paul Router, for example. Yeah, I thought this was a beautiful watch, and sometimes I really appreciate seeing these kinds of Rolex, vintage Rolex pieces on the wrists of, people like Daniel Gandelman, because obviously he can probably get whatever else he likes, or he can do that kind of reverse flex of, like, I don't have to wear a watch at all, or I wear a Whoop, or I will wear an Apple Watch or a Swatch kind of thing. He doesn't do that. He gets a good mechanical watch. I'm not sure if that is intended, that he actually went after a model that's usually called Oyster Date, right? Being the founder and CEO of a dating app. Not sure if he's into those sorts of puns, but at least I picked up on that, and I thought that was pretty interesting. This is one that generally caught me off guard. Again, it is a choice that evinces some personal consideration, some sense of discernment, some authentic enjoyment of watches and collecting. This is Manchester City's number 3, of course, Portugal national football team defender as well, Ruben Dias, who just committed his future to the Etihad Stadium. He signed a new 4-year contract, and he was wearing a Patek Philippe reference 3649 line 1J, which is basically an integrated bracelet dress watch, a rectangular one, sometimes lumped together with the whole genre of gondolo, although I'm not sure if that would be an internal designation by Patek at all. I really love the bracelets on these. It's maybe like a less ornate version of what you see on the AP bamboo, right, which we were looking at just a few days back, right, where you have these cylindrical links with a fine taper from the case to the buckle. Compared to that bamboo on Jules Koundé's wrist, and that you can find a little further down on my Instagram feed, this piece is actually rather oversized. And I think you can kind of see that on Ruben Dias's wrist as well. I think the measurements are something like 34 by 40, I want to say. And what is really distinctive about this particular piece is you can see that there's that other line of writing at 6 o'clock that kind of counterbalances the Patek Philippe signature at 12. That's actually a Tiffany and Company signature. So this is a piece from the late 70s that was actually retailed and signed by the prestige American jewelry house based out of New York, one of Patek's esteemed and long-term collaborators. And it has a beautiful natural stone black onyx style. And as it happens, he did a whole photo shoot with this particular outfit, which is a suit with a matching tie from the same cloth. Has a certain 90s vibe to it, certainly a throwback, much like the watch itself. And of course, he had a bunch of shots with his tracksuit as well. And that actually goes to show you a little bit of the flexibility, or rather versatility of this particular piece, right? I know a lot of people, well, most watch collectors don't even care, and perhaps they shouldn't, right? That people would wear a dress watch or a sports watch with just about everything. But for people who care, sometimes we can get really caught up on this idea, this is a precious metal dress watch, and I should really be wearing this only for a cocktail party or a black tie event, which I think at the end of the day just takes the joy out of it a little bit. My mind works in the way that I love learning about the rules, the conventions, and the traditions. But as one of my favorite makers has it, you learn the rules so that you can one day break them. So I think it's good to bend or even break these rules when it comes to this particular distinction between what is a sports watch and what is a dress watch, and where we can wear either one of these genres. I think this just looks cool on either one, right? Whether you want to be kind of a mod, I guess, have kind of an irreverent take on on some sort of formal clothing, or you want to inhabit a mob boss aesthetic, an integrated bracelet dress watch may be just the thing. So this is Ruben Diaz and his Patek Philippe reference 3649 line 1J. Here is one of, speaking of throwbacks, maybe the ultimate throwback. Macaulay Culkin with his partner. Hi, Hoffrey. Shalom to you too, Ryan Hoffrey. Nice to see you. Macaulay Culkin with his long-term partner, Brenda Song. This is actually from the Valentine's Day issue of the Cosmopolitan, the love issue, as they called it, where the couple was actually on the cover. I managed to peep one of the shots where Macaulay Culkin is actually resting his head on Brenda's knee, and he is wearing the candy pink Oyster Perpetual 36. I hope Tickle My Talk is still there. And please hit the like button, by the way. That would be very much appreciated. I know since the live stream is quite late, I try to keep them a little shorter, or on the shorter side these days, so that people can catch up with it later. And if you hit the like button, it would be easier for them to see it on their feeds, right? Obviously, if a video has more views and more likes, it gains more exposure, but certainly it gains almost certain exposure to people who already follow the channel, who have subscribed to it, so on and so forth. So I would very much appreciate an upvote at this moment. We were just talking about how after the hype perhaps died down for particular colors, especially particular dial colors of the Oyster Perpetual, perhaps they're becoming once again quite popular in a different way. And Mac was wearing an Oyster Perpetual 36 with the candy pink dial for this photo shoot. I mean, obviously these things take place under the oversight, of a stylist. But for the most part, what was given by the stylist and what was theirs in terms of the rings and jewelry and watches was mostly marked out. So I'm guessing this is actually his watch. And pink and blue actually goes really well, I find, in the way that you can easily combine a navy blazer with a pink Oxford cloth shirt with a button-down collar, right? So however it ended up on Macaulay Culkin's wrist, this candy pink dial Oyster Perpetual certainly looks great in this largely denim-clad scene. That is, of course, the reference 126.000-0008. And again, these lacquered dials were, of course, a throwback to the 70s style of colorful dials that Rolex had for their date justs and day dates primarily. And those dials are called Stella dials because that was the name of the dial maker that produced them for Rolex. I really like it, actually. Even though, again, as Tickle My Talk was saying, earlier that he just got an allocation for his wife for this exact watch. I think it can actually be unisex. If Aussie Expat is in the audience, he can tell us a few things about that too, because I know the missus has one of these pieces as well. Though I don't recall the exact size. I think it was the 36. I think it was the OP36. I wonder if Aussie ever took it out for a spin. I wonder if he ever wore it, but could be interesting. Of course, the U.S. Open is starting. I know a few folks from the New York City or tri-state crowd, when it comes to our circles, have already been attending events at or around the U.S. Open, and world number one Belarusian tennis player Aryna Sabalenka is arriving as the defending champion, of course. I don't think the repeat happens very often. I think this will be probably the second time only in a decade, after Serena won actually 3 consecutive titles. I thought it was just back to back, but she won in 2012, 2013, 2014. So after that, I don't think anyone came to the US Open and managed to actually repeat the title. So it would be quite interesting if Aryna manages to do that. Of course, since last fall, and I think US Open was in a way part of the big reveal for her as well. Sabalenka has been an ambassador for Audemars Piguet, so she wears some very interesting watches, which I have covered in the past. This is probably the flashiest one yet. She has had very beautiful Royal Oaks that were uniquely complicated, that were simple, time-only designs with some gem setting. She has a chrono with the rainbow colored sapphires on the octagonal bezel. But this probably, in terms of the sheer weight of it, really takes the cake. It's the reference 26242, the 41 millimeter Audemars Piguet Royal Oak chronograph in 18 karat pink gold, fully set with brilliant cut diamonds. 134 brilliant cut diamonds on the case, 40 brilliant cut diamonds on the octagonal bezel, 331 on the 18 karat pink gold dial, and 632 brilliant cut diamonds on the integrated bracelet. And, you know, I mean, you tell me what you think in the chat. I like the way that they do the gem setting on the Royal Oak. You know, in a way they keep the hexagonal bolts on the octagonal bezel, right? Because those are a distinctive part of the design. I like the contrast that it creates visually. I like the rhythm it brings to that gem setting on the octagonal bezel. And here too, we have a similar thing for the contrasting surfaces on the integrated bracelet as well, where you have the brilliant cut diamonds encrusted on what are what end up being sparkling surfaces, and that contrasts, of course, with the finishing of these tapering interlinks, which is grain brushed. right? So you still have that interplay there, which I think is again an exciting part of the design. Wow, that's an amazing compliment, man. Frank V says, "You look a lot like my father. Are you from the Dominican Republic?" No, I'm not, unfortunately. But maybe I may have picked up some mannerisms and certain turns of phrase or accent inflections because I landed in New York City in this country, and I did have a lot of Dominican friends. I don't know. Um, if you mean exactly the look of my face, I can only take that as a compliment. But I am unfortunately not from the Dominican Republic or from a Dominican heritage. I remember though I had this ridiculous conversation with someone who drove the Uber when I was back on the East Coast once, and I speak some Spanish. Don't ask me why and how, but it's the kind of Spanish that lasts you for 2 to 5 minutes, and then I completely run out. So we had that moment, that we talked, we exchanged names and pleasantries and whatever, and the minute we started having a real conversation, I couldn't say a single word. So I said, like, I'm really sorry, I'll have to switch to English because my Spanish is done at this moment. And he told me it's a shame that your parents didn't teach you. And I'm like, how do you mean? Because I was telling him, I'm from New York, in this country. Basically, that's where I, became an adult and whatever else. So he assumed that I must be either Nuyorican or maybe Dominican, and he was saying it's a shame your parents didn't teach you Spanish because he thought that I had Puerto Rican or Dominican parents who didn't teach me Spanish, even though that wasn't the story. So that's our interesting memory of the day. So here's Sabalenka with her Audemars Piguet Royal Oak chronograph in 18 karat pink gold that is fully factory set with brilliant cut diamonds. Last but not least, the champion of that bod before it was cool and before the term was even invented. This is Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, actually during his term as governor of California, although the photo was taken in Hawaii in 2005. And he is wearing a very interesting, colorful Audemars Piguet Royal Oak offshore chronograph with a yellow dial and a matching strap. This is the reference 25770. In many ways, it's very similar to the Royal Oak that I'm wearing. I'm going to show you that very quickly. Right, where this model was introduced in 1992, and it was the first Royal Oak to have been designed to be worn exclusively on a leather strap, right? The case construction is slightly different. It was actually revised on the original design by Jörg Haschek, who is the designer of the Vacheron Constantin 222, among others. So in a similar way, in 1996, AP came out with a series of of Royal Oak offshore watches, including a triple calendar, which is the reference 25808, and these series of chronographs that were made to be worn on a leather strap. And it had a couple of they had a couple of motives behind it, right? One was basically to lighten up the watch a little bit, because at the time when the Beast was introduced in 1993, it was a big watch, right? When the original Royal Oak offshore was introduced, a lot of people were turned off by the size, by the weight and thickness of it. So the leather strap options that were initially integrated into the catalog in 1996 was part of a project of lightening up the watch a little bit. It also presented a cheaper option, because it was rather than full integrated bracelet in stainless steel, you only had the leather strap and matching a deployant clasp in matching material. Specifically in 1997, on the 25th anniversary of the Royal Oak design, AP introduced these colorful dials. And I think again, this is part of the lore. Even the company itself can't confirm it, but supposedly they were going to be one-offs, maybe only made in that year on the 25th anniversary. But they actually were so popular among the collectors that they ended up becoming part of the serially produced catalog. And it was not only this yellow dial and the red dial that you see here, but altogether, I think 7 different colors that were introduced. Here you see again the red, the green, the yellow, the orange, and the turquoise. And here you have actually a document, and all of these documents are, by the way, derived from AP Chronicles. Here you have a document from Stern Création, the dial maker, the famous brothers Stern dial makers, where they were trying to ensure the perfect match of color between the dial and the strap. So in each case, you have this guideline where the strap and the dial was developed simultaneously, concurrently. There was also a brown, as you can see, and a purple as well. And the other importance of this particular design, this particular reference, the 25770, and the significance of finding it again on Arnold Schwarzenegger's wrist, is the development of a limited edition in collaboration with the actor, with Schwarzenegger. It was a 500-piece limited run, and it was meant to coincide with the release of his movie End of Days, the 1999 movie, if I'm not mistaken. It was a limited run of 500 pieces, where you had this blacked out version of the 25770, kind of a Kevlar style Velcro strap instead of leather. The case has a blackened PVD treatment on stainless steel, and the dial itself is blacked out as well, where the oversized Arabic numerals, as well as the classic bathtub shaped hands are rendered in a contrasting shade of yellow. So, I mean, I hesitated to use the word fluorescent or neon because it's not exactly that, but it is meant to contrast highly from or over against that black backdrop. And of course, again, this limited edition in and of itself, I think, is historically important. But that historical importance aside, it also encouraged Audemars Piguet to collaborate in the future with other important figures, with other celebrities, actors, athletes, artists, and they almost always used, at least for a decade longer, the Royal Oak Offshore as the platform for such collaborations, as the vehicle of these sorts of limited editions. And these limited editions that were really kicked off with the 1999 End of Days Royal Oak Offshore chronograph, the reference 25770 SN, really marked the beginning of a new era for AP and played an important part, again, in expanding, enlarging the global footprint of the brand. All right, so here we are. Now we are going to do something similar in a way, because we're going to look at a watch that actually is about to go on someone's wrist. That being said, it's I think it's about 10 minutes long, the video itself. I will both, because I don't want any strikes on my channel, of course, do a lot of start stops, but you guys know I can't help myself anyways. I have to provide some sort of commentary. So anyways, Joker's Wild, what's this? Crawford is into watches. You'll see the interaction. So he's certainly not a watch guy, but he's very excited to receive this particular piece. So hit the like button if you haven't already. I really appreciate your support. Again, if you want to support the channel in ways that go beyond that, I really appreciate it. And YouTube gives you a number of ways. But as long as you like, that you stay subscribed, and that you share the link with other collectors and enthusiasts, I would be much obliged anyways. So as I mentioned earlier, 4-weight world champion and 2-weight undisputed world champion Terence Crawford is going to fight the Mexican legend Saul Canelo Alvarez in Las Vegas in the Allegiant Stadium. I think it's going to be on September 13th. You guys know Canelo usually fights in May and September. And the fight dates are, roughly intended to coincide with Cinco de Mayo on the one hand and the Mexican Independence Day on the other. Although, it's more often than not, it's going to be a Saturday, no matter what. So in this case, I think the Mexican Independence Day is probably after the fight. Actually, the official date is, I think, this September 16th. Anyway, and that is also an undisputed championship. It will add. Well, by the way, Crawford was the first person to achieve undisputed championships in 2 weight divisions. First male boxer, I should say, in the 4-belt era. So if he does it now, that's a big win for him. It will be his 3rd undisputed championship. He has so far won titles at 130, 135, 140, 147. I think it was at 135 and 147 that he was undisputed previously. He recently won a title at 154, and now he's going up 2 more weight divisions at 168. So it's an enormous challenge ahead of him. But if there's one person who can actually measure up to that, it is Bud Crawford, who is one of the most skilled, dogged, and intelligent fighters of our time. And I think Canelo, especially at that weight, to have become the first undisputed champion and to have held all the 4 belts with short hiatuses, I think, for quite an extended period of time by now, is a very interesting opponent. We can, of course, we might just end up being disappointed, where Canelo will outsize and overpower Bud Crawford in a similar fashion to how Dimitri Bivol overpowered and outsized him, outreached him at 175, but it remains to be seen anyway. So this is from the camp of Terence Bud Crawford, and it is going to be a watch industry CEO presenting a new watch to him. So let's watch it together.
What I was saying, to your team in the car, is you've got.
This is, by the way, this is Jason. This is my friend Jason Sarkoyan, who goes by the Watch Designer on Instagram. So I'll drop the link in the chat. I'm sure you will learn a lot. You will see a lot of interesting designs, for the most part his own, on his page. So please take a look. Yeah, you see, Joker, you remember this kind of stuff. I mean, the really disappointing thing about boxing sometimes is because there's no universal way of judging the standing of a fighter, right? It's not a league, it's not a tournament-like competition where the best have to fight the best every year after year, and someone is awarded a trophy at the end, right? So there's always going to be lovers and haters, people who are biased one way or another. And people who have been biased against Crawford have been now for 4 weight divisions, and we are coming up to his 5th. They have been degrading and devaluing every single victory that this man has, whereas they have always overvalued and inflated the victories of fighters that they prefer to Bud Crawford for, God knows why. I'm not going to go into detail with that, but let's watch this. Mathieu Avalon, this is the Ulysse Nardin managing director, and my friend Jason is sitting in the background. He's the bespectacled gentlemen. And I think, Joker, you'll like how Haviland actually makes the connection between Ulysse Nardin and Crawford. I actually really appreciate it. He has thought about it, right? I really care when that happens, but let's listen first.
Brands that they say that, but they only do this. I'm not going to mention them, but you've got quite a few in the watchmaking industry. And for UN, it's the opposite. We do that. We are very serious watchmaker. We've changed the game of watchmaking multiple times, but we only say a bit, because when you know your true value and what you do, you don't have to brag and, to talk.
So essentially, he's saying that there are a lot of brands in the horological industry who overpromise and underdeliver. But Ulysse Nardin is the opposite, right? We know our value, we know our worth. We have a certain standing in the watch world that ought to go uncontested. And therefore, we don't feel the need to be braggadocious, be loud. We don't feel the need to scream. We can simply whisper.
To talk about it. And that's why, some of the most important people on the planet wears UN. Michael Jordan is a good client. Liu Jiandong is the founder of JD.com. It's the second biggest e-commerce company in China. He's wearing UN. Jeff Bezos, if you look at the early pictures, when he was already big at Amazon, was wearing a UN. So that's why for me, I'm really privileged for you to be able to wear, your first UN, because I think you really embody that spirit.
And that's it, right? And again, some of you in the audience already know Crawford isn't much of a talker, right? He doesn't like to go out in public and constantly brag about his achievements. He doesn't really advertise himself, going to these talk shows, radio programs, now YouTube channels, to promote himself, right? And I think, honestly, as a fan of Crawford, I think he can do better. And in the run-up to this fight, I see the effort from his team to do that better for him. So I'm really happy about that. But that being said, right, there's a reason why we have these different elements in the sport of boxing, right? We do actually have someone with the title promoter. So you can certainly make the argument, and I think athletes like Crawford do this quite often, that it's not his job to promote himself. There are people who do that, right? So you have the athlete, you have the manager, and you have the promoter. And within that promoting body also, you have a number of different roles, right? There are matchmakers, there are marketing specialists, there are other sorts of handlers. Anyways, we don't need to go into the detail, but I really love this parallel that Haviland is establishing between the brand and the person, the athlete who endorses the brand. He talked about how Ulysse Nardin doesn't need to prove its worth. It's a watchmaker that knows its value, that is comfortable in its skin, that is aware of its legacy. And for that reason, they don't feel like they need to speak much. They just do. They just act in the same way that Crawford simply gets in the ring and bashes his opponent or stops his opponent, even in fights where he had walked into as the underdog.
Of being on top of your game, but you don't have to brag so much about it because you know your value and you know where you are. And I think I really connected, with what you said to me yesterday, and I hope you're gonna like the watch.
Sure.
By the way, I don't know the details of this project, so perhaps I shouldn't comment, but I also know that Jason, being a designer, on top of that, also has exactly this sort of mind where he can make connections between different industries, different areas of creativity, and make connections between, watch brands and athletes, watch brands and artists. So I think this is supremely cool. And I feel that he has that sort of role here too, in bringing together this brand and Bud Crawford.
When people tell me what Ulysse Nardin is, this is usually what I say. We are one of the most important watchmakers in Switzerland. But at the same time, I say that we are the watchmaking startup of the industry. And we are the oldest watchmaking startup of the industry because we have a very strong pioneering spirit. We've got a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. But we've been in the game since 1846. So, we know what we are talking about.
That's not a question for me to answer, Captain Kirk. I hope you understand that. I hope you get a sense of what I mean. People are not always privileged to share these kinds of details, especially not themselves. But yeah, I think you got what I mean already.
And I think what I've got here is very special. I came with a watch from Switzerland directly. It left the factory basically a week ago. It's been in the hands of our top watchmakers. We call it the haute horlogerie, high-end, the most complex mechanism. And we've got 10 highly skilled watchmakers that are working on the watches. And on your watch, one watchmaker in particular did it from the beginning to the end.
Honestly, I think it was a blessing for both Ulysse Nardin and Gérard Perregaux to have split back from Kering and gain their independence again. And I hope they continue to succeed on their own. I don't know if you guys remember, but a few years back, these two companies were basically bought out from the larger luxury conglomerates and devolved away from it by an investment from a group of their own executives. And I think they have both been doing quite well on their own, and I hope they continue to do that, and they set a model, they mark out a path for that for some other brands that, at least in my eyes, seem to be languishing under this sort of luxury group ownership.
Do you want to see it?
Yes.
Here we go. Here we are.
And it's a limited edition.
So it's called the Blast Free Wheel. I think you like blue. I hope you like blue.
With Bernard in. Oh yeah. Tell them got the blue watch.
Yes. So it's something special. Just gonna help you out. That's the way you press the two button here, and that will open the deployment buckle. It's a 44 millimeter blast free wheel. It's a very complex white gold case. It's open on the side, so you've got a lot of.
So this is, again, this is one of those watches that I love admiring from far, since it's a 44 millimeter case. But the construction is really beautiful for this blast freewheel model. It's a white gold case with this sort of three-pronged lug design in the way it flows into the strap. And it does come, I believe, with the two different straps. Bud's watch now is on a leather strap, but there's also a rubber strap for it. And I think there are different colors and possibly different materials that have been available for the Blast freewheel series previously, because this is a particular iteration of it. This is a limited edition of it. Avalon is going to continue to explain it, so I'm not going to get ahead of that. But what I want to mark out about the construction, and you kind of get a sense here from it, that white gold case actually lacks a traditional bezel, right? So you have this kind of open view of the dial from a variety of angles, from the widest possibility from the widest variety of possible angles, because it has that glass box sapphire crystal sitting on top of it. So you can see everything, not only from a full frontal view, but also from side angles as well, thanks to that glass box sapphire crystal.
Sapphire on the watch to admire the movements. Yeah, let me put it through. Here we go. If it's too tight, we have room to make it slightly.
Yeah, we're about to loosen it up a little bit.
Yeah. And you see, basically, you've got a lot of blue. So the blue is made out of silicone marquetry. So it's actually, the same silicone part that you have in the chip of a phone. And we pioneered the use of that material in the watchmaking industry.
This is very interesting. You guys probably have heard from before that you have that traditional artisanal method of marquetry, where you have these variously sized inlays, usually of wood, in decorating a piece, in this case a watch dial. And Ulysse Nardin has previously used in the Freak collection silicone to do something similar, and they have carried it over to the Blast series as well. And Avalon will continue to describe. Ryan Hoffrey, thank you. Take care. Have a great evening. I'm guessing it's your birthday that is on Thursday, so in advance, my congratulations, and have a great week off. Take care.
I'm just going to make it a little bit loose in 21. And what we do is usually you have marquetry of wood, you have marquetry of straw, for instance, but we pioneered the marquetry of silicone. So we make more than 90 components in silicone. They are as thin as one of your hair, and they are applied in the marquetry on the dial.
So just to get another look on the... Jancy says, Breguet combines class with masculinity better than any other brand. Well, Avalon probably disagrees, and he will say that it is actually Ulysse Nardin who combines masculinity with class better than anybody else. I have a lot of love for Breguet. I know I can't convince you ever, and I know I can't aspire to your level of admiration either. But so this is a rendering of that silicon marquetry they use on the dial of this watch. I think down here they have maybe another view, and it's like, you know, different sizes of inlays and different shades of blue that are used in those inlays for the silicon marquetry of this watch. So it's quite chameleon-like. And yeah, there we go. It's really a beautiful piece. I mean, again, probably not only too big for my aesthetic, but also, you know, a little too out there as well. But it's a very cool piece. It's a flying tourbillon as well, and he will talk about that. That tourbillon cage is at 6 o'clock in this case. You see that glass box crystal, which gives you also a side angle, a different kind of view into the movement as well. So going back to the video again.
And you get, depending the light, really a different, you know, reflection. And you've got a very complex mechanism. We call it a tourbillon. So all the heart of the watch is making a full revolution on itself every 60 seconds.
Mm.
It's a manual wind mechanism, so you have to wind it, manually. And you've got a 7 days power reserve.
When you say winding?
Winding, so that's the way you do it.
So that's how you will realize, Joker's Wild, that Crawford is not really a watch guy, and Jason is going to try to explain it. But this is a hand-wound tourbillon, and it has a week-long power reserve at full crank. So you can basically let it sit for a whole week and cycle through other watches before you come back to this to wear it again.
Yeah.
You see it moving.
Meaning, like some watches, like your Rolex or maybe a Patek or whatever, when you move with your wrist, it'll wind the watch as it's moving. This, for example, you can wear it for days, but if you're not winding it through the crown, you're not charging the movement.
So that's the way you wind it. And here you see next to the tourbillon, next to the heart of the
will
watch.
it change the time?
No, it will not change the
No.
time. The way
You
to change the time is
if
to,
you're
you know,
wearing
pull out
it-
the crown.
If you're wearing it every so often, you're just going to want to keep winding it. a
But
little
when
bit.
you put it back, that's the way you're going to wind.
So
And
the
that's-
winding gonna keep it moving in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it keeps moving. It is moving. It
They don't
doesn't
need to
stop.
wind it for 7 days.
But if
So there's also, of course, a power reserve indicator that's at 4 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. The winding wheel itself is exposed at 3 o'clock, of course, and it's beautifully decorated, and again with blue accents as it happens. And what you see at 12 o'clock is actually perhaps the showpiece of the movement, the mechanism that greets you from full frontal view, and that's the barrel that actually holds the 7-day power reserve at full charge.
If you see it stop and you're wearing it and you're moving your wrist and it's not changing, it's because it's not automatic.
And the power reserve indication, it's here. You see the triangle. It goes from here to here. So when it moves here on this side, it means that it's fully warm. Here you can put a little bit more power reserve now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it goes to E, you just keep winding. But when it goes to F, don't keep, just get close enough and then just let it, you know what I mean? Because if you can
yeah, that's much better. That's much better. That's a good fit.
So how you know when it's on F?
It just indicates it that there's a hand that indicates.
So you see here the small arrow here, the power reserve. When it's empty, it's when you've got it's here on that side, and then it's gonna move around. 1, 2, 3. So here you can still wind a little bit more to have the full power reserve, but that means that
wind it a little bit and you'll see it move.
Yeah, you can really wind it, with more strength. And the barrel is here, so that's basically here at 12 o'clock. That's where you've got a very long spring that will release the energy step by step to give you the power to the watch.
Mm. Okay.
And what you do obviously is you put the strap here so that it fits perfectly on the wrist. Up. There you go.
Oh yeah, that's what. Look good on me too.
That's a good fit. That's a good fit.
That blue.
And that's the type of watch we were talking about in the car. When you know watchmaking, when you know your shit, people who will see you wearing that.
I love Avalan probably has never said anything like that in his life, but sometimes these sorts of executive types have the urge to be cool. So he had to say when you know your shit,
that they will say, okay, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, it's because it's
you gotta pull it off one more.
One more here. Here we go. So if you happen to meet at some point people who like watches and know watchmaking, they will understand that you know your shit, basically.
It's called Sting HD.
All right, so that was it actually. He's presenting him with a bracelet that was made to, in a way, match the aesthetics, if not the spirit of this watch. But that's not really our forte or focus. So I wanted to skip over that. There we go. So that's Havalan. That's Jason Sarkoyan at the watch designer, and the 4-weight world champion Terence Crawford wearing his Ulysse Nardin Blast free wheel Marquetry. It's a limited edition that I think came out actually already a few years back. I think it came out in 2023. Beautiful. I'm really glad that they came together with this particular collaboration. I like the way that they paid attention to an actual alignment, an actual resonance, so to speak, a synergy between the company and the person who endorses it. And Mathieu Avalan, I think, described it pretty well. It's a match between a brand that delivers exactly what it promises and doesn't have to make a scene about it, doesn't have to shout it from the rooftops, precisely because it knows its value. And in the same way, it is for a champion who knows his standing in the sport and who doesn't necessarily need to brag about it in an ostentatious way, because he announces his presence with his actions. And Captain Kirk says it fits pretty well, actually. Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. And that's, I think, depends on how you measure it, but he said 44 on paper. It's a 45 millimeter diameter for the case. But look, some people prefer oversized watches anyways. So I kind of like it. And I know, people almost automatically go towards the freak when it comes to Ulysse Nardin, and I don't blame them, right? In many ways, freak, at least in the 21st century, is what perhaps best represents, or at least best summarizes, that innovative spirit of the brand that Avalon was talking about. But I really like the case design of the Blast as well. And for them to take a traditional artisanal craft such as Marquetry, that people use, all sorts of organic material to decorate dials, usually wood, and for UN to take that and use silicon to render this blue dial that has so many different shades and facets of the same color. It's, I think it's quite remarkable. I think the website says price on request or something like that, but I believe it's somewhere around 150,000 in US dollars, more or less. And it's offered either on a waterproof rubber strap that has this sort of velvet effect on it, or the blue alligator leather strap, which is what Crawford's piece has, and it is apparently compatible with other Blast tourbillon straps. Pardon. Very cool. Joker's Wild. This could be an interesting question to wind down. If you could match a watch with your character and personality, what would it be? What would it be? Well, I mean, I'll start by saying that I find it hard to match my personality with a single watch, right? That's why I am, for better or worse, a collector and not a one watch guy, or two watch guy even. So it's pretty hard. But if I were to choose one watch, one particular kind of design, it has to be the classic Rolex Submariner, right? Something from the 4-digit era. My preference is the 5513 matte dial. I find that seriousness that it finds in the simplicity of its design very appealing. I find it actually a very strong statement because of the balanced look of its design. As much as I also like the Royal Oak personally as a design, I feel that's a lot more ostentatious in a way. And it also has a date. So symmetry of the dial is unfortunately interrupted, even though I can by now stomach it, since that's part of the original design. But yeah, I always go back to the classic Submariner, and I'm biased, of course, because that's what I came up on. That's what I inherited from my father, and that's what I proudly wear on most days of the week. So I think that says something, right? And it's not, in that case, it's not only an aesthetic preference. I like the no nonsense design of it. I think there's a rigor in that. I think there is a certain severity in that, a seriousness, which are all part of my distinctive traits. I like the fact that it has over time become a design icon, but initially it was something quite utilitarian, right? And I think that's something that I want to preserve in the core of who I am and what I do, because I like, first and foremost, especially in the work that I do on Instagram and YouTube, I like to put out the substance first, right? I always prioritize that. I want to serve. I want to teach. I want to inform. And for that, you have to serve some sort of utility, right? You have to have a utilitarian approach. But I also have, my own pretensions in a way to have a sense of style, to have an aesthetic direction, to appeal also to the senses and not only to reason, to intellect, to the brain, if you so choose. So I think that is also something that the Submariner gained over time, right? What was once a purpose-oriented, utilitarian piece, a tool watch, as it's called, has over time become one of the most iconic and unchanging designs for an ideal sports watch. So the perfect blend of style and substance. That would be who I am as a watch, a vintage Rolex Submariner, like the 5513. All right. Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed in not having received any form of financial support. So I will point that out before I sign off, but I do appreciate very much the kind of company that Captain Kirk, Joker's Wild, Ghost of Childish Gambino, sorry, Yiddish Gambino, Ryan Hoffrey, and others have kept with me, Captain Kirk, John C. as well. I appreciate you. Thank you for giving, more direction and meaning to this live stream. Thank you for following me on Instagram and staying subscribed here. If you do, if you do check out the posts that I shared with you today, drop a few likes, maybe share your perspective in the comments. I would appreciate that. If not, if that's extra work, please at least leave a comment after this live stream ends. That's very valuable for me. In a very self-serving way in the first place, right? To boost the kind of work that I do here. but also because I simply want to hear from you, get your feedback, see if I can respond to a question or two. And I simply want to hear from you. So please use the comment section for that and write to me below. If you want to support the channel, and the channel is in dire need of your support, the YouTube, of course, provides a number of ways, super chat, super thanks, and memberships, which you can buy for yourself or gift to others, and which give you access to an archive of exclusive content. If you would like to help in other ways, I show you how in the video description, so feel free to check that out. But if nothing else, I would really appreciate it if you share the link to either my Instagram feed or this channel with other collectors, with watch enthusiasts, so you can help me at least grow this community, and that costs nothing. Right? If you do actually value what I do here, if you do want to support me, that's the least you can do for my time. So I do appreciate that. Thank you again. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Goodbye.